If you're selling artwork that's based on digital files, one thing you're going to figure out is that naming the digital files is actually somewhat difficult. So here I just have a sort of sequence of file names. We'll just say these are all the same image and that we specialize in pictures of sunsets. So the first one is just an image file out of the camera. That's not very good. It's not descriptive at all. And you only have 4 digits of uniqueness here after the 10,000th image, which may sound like a lot. They're going to start conflicting. You can't really keep this file name as your full file name. Then it's got pic of sunset. Well, if you're taking pictures of sunsets and selling them, you're probably going to have more than one. That's not descriptive. So down here we've got sunset at Crystal Pier. That's getting better. Now we've got sunset Crystal Pier with a little bit of a date, August 23. That's pretty good. Below that, we've got that same file name with a size on it. Maybe you're selling the same exact file, but at different sizes. Some sizes you'll be able to sell the same file, and 8x10 and 11x14 are very similar crops. You can probably use the same file for both of them, probably the higher res one for the 11x14. Then you could sell that as an 8x10. But this could also be other things, like maybe there's a color version or a black and white version. This is sort of like different variations of the same file. You're going to need something to keep track of which file is which so they don't overwrite each other. Then finally down at the bottom, if you sell on Amazon, this beginning of the file name here is the FN SKU for the fulfillment network SKU. That should be at the beginning of the file name and will give you all the uniqueness that you need. So here's a more complete list of things to check when you're making a file name. You need to have a description of some sort in the file name, but that can't be it by itself. There needs to be something that also makes it unique, which if you're selling on Amazon should definitely be the FN SKU. If you're not, then maybe it's the date or a location. If you are selling on Amazon, use the FN SKU in the file name, not the ASIN. It's okay to use the merch SKU or the ASIN as long as you have the FN SKU. The FN SKU can be pretty important to have in the file name for prepping purposes. If you're using the FN SKU, then definitely have it at the beginning of the file name. If you're using a year in the date, maybe just a 2-digit year in the month, like 823, always use the leading 0 if you're on the numbers less than 10. That helps keeps things consistent, and that'll be down here in a minute. Another thing to add is the color mode. If it's color or black and white, or maybe a tone, maybe it's sepia, maybe you have sepia, black and white, and color as versions of the same file. And here we have the sequence number. What if you're selling a set of 4 files that are all related? You could have the same beginning of the file name, but then you're going to need a sequence number. When you do the sequence number, make sure you do leading zeros. So if it's if you have a set of 6, it can just be 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, etc. If you have more than 10, the leading zeros need to be the number of digits. The number that you use needs to have enough leading zeros to make it the same number of digits as the highest numbers. So if you're going up to 1001, they all need to have 4 digits. So 1 would be 0001, and then they will all sort properly and stay together. You could also add the print size or the ratio. If you're selling the same image as an 8x10 and a 12x18, those are drastically different ratios or proportions. You're probably going to want to note that in the file name so that you can have the rest of the file name be the same, and then just have the print size appended to the end of the file name so you can know which one to make which size. Another thing is the length of the file name. Try to keep it less than 45 characters. The file name does get printed on the back of the prints. If it's too long, it'll scroll off the end and you won't see whatever's at the end. 45 characters is kind of a lot. If you can't keep it to less than that, you're probably doing something wrong and need to come up with something a little bit more consistent and a shorter version of it. When you're writing out separate words, I'd like to use a separator, and usually instead of spaces, sometimes they use a space. If it's in between the FN SKU and the rest of it, sometimes I'll use a space as a separator there, but I like to use dashes and underscores as well. When you get to the file extension, be consistent and always use lowercase .jpg. Don't use JPEG or uppercase JPEG, just lowercase JPG. And then when it comes to special characters, we recommend you don't use any, only use letters, numbers, spaces, dash, and underscore. If you use commas or quotes, You might have times where you want to make a CSV that has all of the file names you have in it, and that can be difficult with commas or quotes. A comma separated list of values, if you have a comma in the value, can mess it up. Most spreadsheets will handle that, but we still see issues occasionally with generally around quotes, because if the spreadsheet sees a comment, it'll usually enclose it in quotes for its own purpose to know that it's not part of a separated value. And then if you have extra quotes in there, something like that, it gets confusing. Sometimes we see that on our end. We do use a lot of CSVs, and sometimes that's an issue when we're working on Amazon stuff. Other characters can cause issues with printer software or with web uploads. So generally, we just try to keep everything to be either a letter, a number, or a space, a dash, or an underscore. Uppercase letters are fine. I generally try to keep everything as lowercase. And then one last thing here, this doesn't really apply so much to artwork, but keep in mind that the words you use in the file name are generally going to show up on the back of the print. So saying something's a redo in the file name, your customer might see that and see it on the back and think it's a redo. On portraits, sometimes we'll see that somebody removed a double chin or something and they named the file name that. That's probably not what your customer wants to see on the back of the file name. So one last thing about this, if you are selling on Amazon, you're using our FBQ system, if you name your files properly, you can do a bulk mapping. And this can make it very easy to add a lot of mappings into our system all at once. So I have some set up. I'm going to go grab these and we'll bring them in. And you can see I have an FN SKU at the beginning of them. And then I have a brief description. And then if they're sets, you can see these two both have the same FN SKU, these top two. Then I have a sequence number at the end. And if you use these options above, parse the SKU from the file name. So it's going to take this SKU off of the file name and put it in the SKU field here. And then you tell it what the separator is. The separator that I used here is a space. And then auto select files, it will notice that these two are the same because the FN SKU is the same. So when I click on this one, it knows that these two are together, and all I have to do is choose a size and the catalog. And I can create a mapping from those two. Now when I go select this next one, it sees these two have the same FN SKU. It's going to put them together and everything is done. Create mapping. Click on this one, create mapping. That one was by itself. This one is by itself. This one is by itself. And these last two are by themselves. But since I had them named properly, this all worked smoothly and was very easy to add all of these images into a mapping.